I thought I was just delivering a package. That's what I keep telling myself now, in the quiet moments when I can still hear my own thoughts, when the world isn't pressing in from all sides, when men in dark suits aren't watching my every move, when I'm not wondering if the next knock on my door will be my last. I was just delivering a package, a simple favor. The kind you do without thinking because you're tired and running late, and the doorman looks at you with those pleading eyes that say, "Please, just this once." My name is Sofia Reyes, and I've been a waitress at Marino's for 3 years. Double shifts on weekends. Early mornings that bleed into late nights. Tips that barely cover rent in a building that's slowly falling apart. One pipe burst at a time. The 7th floor was supposed to be the nice floor. The one where people who actually made something of their lives lived behind heavy doors with multiple locks. I'd never been up there before that Tuesday. The doorman, Jerry, sweet Jerry with his grandson's photo in his wallet, pressed the package into my hands like it was burning him. 7th floor, he said. 7D. They're expecting it. His voice shook. I should have noticed that. I should have asked why his hands were trembling, why he wouldn't meet my eyes, why he practically shoved me toward the elevator and then disappeared into the back room. But I was late. My manager had already called twice. I had exactly 12 minutes to drop this off and catch the crosstown bus, and I was wearing yesterday's uniform because I'd slept through my alarm after a 10-hour shift. I wasn't thinking about anything except getting through another day in a city that grinds you down until you're nothing but bone and exhaustion. The elevator was old. It groaned and stuttered between floors, giving me too much time to look at the package. Plain brown paper. No return address. Heavy. Something shifted inside when I tilted it. I heard a soft thud, like photographs sliding against cardboard. For half a second, I thought about opening it. For half a second, I was curious. Thank God I didn't. The 7th floor hallway smelled like money. That specific scent of expensive carpet and fresh paint and air that's been filtered through systems I couldn't afford to imagine. The lighting was soft, golden. Everything was quiet in that way that only comes with thick walls and people who've paid extra to not hear their neighbors breathe. I checked the package again. 7D, I counted doors as I walked. 7A, 7B, 7C. I knocked on 7B. I still don't know why. Maybe I miscounted. Maybe the numbers blurred together because I hadn't slept properly in days. Maybe God or fate or whatever force controls these things decided that my life needed to implode at exactly 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon. Maybe I was always going to knock on that door. Maybe it was always going to open. It opened slowly. Too slowly. Like whoever was on the other side wanted me to understand that they were in control of every second, every breath, every heartbeat between the knock and the reveal. I heard a lock click, then another, then a chain slide free. The door opened 6 inches, and I saw him for the first time. Dark suit. Expensive. The kind where you can see the quality in how it moves, how it fits like it was built specifically for his frame. Dark hair, perfectly styled even though it was the middle of the afternoon. Dark eyes that landed on me with the weight of a physical touch, and a smile, not welcoming, not friendly. A smile that said he'd been waiting for me, even though I'd never met him before in my life. Wrong apartment, I said quickly, already stepping back. I'm sorry. I was looking for 7D. He didn't move. Behind him, I saw them. 3 men in black, standing perfectly still, watching me like predators watch prey. The apartment beyond was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Art on the walls that probably cost more than I'd make in a lifetime. Everything pristine, everything perfect, everything dangerous. His eyes dropped to the package in my hands. Something changed in his face. The smile vanished. His jaw tightened. When he looked back at me, I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine concern mixed with cold calculation. "Come inside," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled. The kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to be obeyed. I just need to deliver this to... now. I should have run. Every instinct I had screamed at me to turn around, get back in that elevator, and never look back. But one of the men behind him had moved, blocked the hallway. Another appeared from somewhere I couldn't see, closing in from the other direction. I was surrounded before I even understood what was happening. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a sound like a tomb ceiling. He took the package from my hands, gently, carefully, like it might explode. Maybe it could. He opened it while his men watched me, their hands resting on their sides where I knew. Somehow, I just knew. They had guns hidden under their jackets. Photographs spilled out onto his marble entryway table. Crime scene photos, bodies, blood, money, faces I didn't recognize, but clearly he did because his entire body went rigid. Evidence. This wasn't a package. It was a threat. He looked at me, and I saw my death in his eyes. "Who sent you?" he asked. "The doorman, Jerry," he just said. "Who sent you?" "I don't know. I'm just delivering it. I work at Marino's. I was running late. He asked me to bring it up. I didn't know what was in it. I swear to God." He held up one hand. I stopped talking. The silence was worse than any interrogation. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said finally. His voice had changed. Softer now, but somehow more terrifying. "You've become a problem." "I didn't see anything," I said quickly, desperately. "I'll forget this happened. I'll leave right now and—" "You saw me. You saw them. You saw the contents of that package. You're now a witness to something that could start a war in this city." He stepped closer. I could smell his cologne. Cedar and something darker, something that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "I'm Dominic Vale. You've heard the name. Everyone in this neighborhood had. He owned buildings, businesses. People whispered about him in the break room at work, how he controlled half the city's underground economy, how politicians took his calls, how people who crossed him disappeared. I thought they were just stories. The kind of urban legends cities create to explain the inexplicable. They weren't stories. "You have two options," Dominic said. "You accept my protection, or you disappear." "What does that mean?" "It means you belong to me now. You live where I say. Go where I say. Tell me everything about your life so I can keep you alive." He paused, letting that sink in. "Or you walk out that door and hope they find me before they find you." "They? Whoever sent this package, whoever knows you delivered it. Whoever's about to learn that I now have evidence that could destroy them." His smile returned, sharp as a blade. "From now on, no one touches you. You're mine. And in my world, Sophia Reyes, that's the only thing keeping you alive. Protection sounds beautiful until you realize it's just another word for prison." Dominic's men moved me out of my apartment that same night. I wasn't allowed to pack alone. Two of them stood in my bedroom doorway while I threw clothes into a duffel bag, watching my hands like I might pull a weapon from my underwear drawer. They wouldn't let me bring much. "Where you're going, you won't need any of this," one of them said, taking my box of photographs. Pictures of my sister Julia, my mom before she died, birthday candles and Christmas mornings, and proof that I used to have a life that belonged to me. "I need those," I said. "We'll have them scanned and returned." They wouldn't even let me say goodbye to my neighbors. The penthouse Dominic moved me into was beautiful in the way museums are beautiful, expensive and untouchable and absolutely not meant for living. Everything was white or glass or marble. The furniture looked like it had never been sat on. The kitchen had appliances I didn't know how to use. My bedroom had a door that locked from the outside. I tried to leave the second morning. A black car was waiting on the street below. The driver, Marcus E., he said his name was, though I'm sure that wasn't true, smiled at me through the window. "Mr. Vale thought you might want to go to work today. I'll drive you. I can take the bus." "No," he said simply. "You can't." I went back inside. Dominic called every few hours. Where was I? What was I doing? Had anyone contacted me? The questions felt clinical, efficient, like he was checking items off a list labeled liability management. He never asked how I was feeling. He never apologized for turning my life into a surveillance state. He just wanted data, confirmation, proof that his asset was still secure. That's all I was to him. An asset, a loose end he needed to control. I tried to maintain normalcy. I called my manager at Marino's and lied about a family emergency. I texted Julia and told her I'd gotten a temporary live-in caretaker job. Wealthy family, great pay, couldn't have visitors. She believed me because she wanted to, because tuition was due and she needed me to be okay so she could stay okay. I walked through the penthouse counting my steps, measuring the cage, 42 steps from the bedroom to the kitchen, 18 steps across the living room, 379 steps if I paced the entire perimeter without stopping. I counted until the numbers stopped meaning anything. Then the threat started. A delivery arrived at the penthouse. Flowers in a black vase. The card said, "Beautiful things die quickly." Dominic's men swept the apartment for listening devices and found two. One in the bedroom, one in the bathroom. Someone had been listening to me breathe, sleep, cry in the shower when I thought I was alone. 2 days later, an envelope appeared under the door. Inside was a photograph of me leaving the building that morning, walking to the corner store for coffee I didn't need but bought anyway just to feel like a person who could make choices. Red marker circled my face. Timestamp in the corner. 7:43 a.m. Someone had been that close. I wanted to handle it myself. I needed to prove I wasn't helpless. Wasn't just some waitress who stumbled into the wrong hallway and needed a dangerous man to save her. I took the photograph to a police station 6 blocks away. The officer at the desk looked bored until I mentioned Dominic's name. Then he looked scared. "This is a civil matter," he said. "Someone is stalking me. Do you have proof it wasn't sent by someone you know? It's a threat." "It's a photograph." He slid it back across the desk. "My advice? Stay away from people like Dominic Vale. Nothing good comes from that world." I was halfway home when Dominic's car pulled up beside me. He didn't ask me to get in. He opened the door and waited, like he knew I would, like he knew I had nowhere else to go. Inside the car, he handed me his phone. On the screen was a photo, the desk sergeant I'd just spoken to, accepting an envelope from a man in a suit. Timestamp. Yesterday. The officer was on someone's payroll. And it wasn't the city's. "You think they'll protect you?" Dominic asked quietly. I didn't answer. "You think anyone in this city will help you without asking what you're worth first?" He took the phone back. "I'm not the good guy, Sophia, but I'm the only one who's keeping you alive." "Why?" The question came out broken. "Why do you care?" "Because you saw what was in that package. Because whoever sent it wants me to know they can reach me anytime, anywhere, through anyone." He leaned forward. "You were chosen as a message. And until I figure out who's sending it, you're the only thing keeping me 3 steps ahead." His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his entire face changed. Every muscle tightening, eyes going cold and flat and deadly. He turned the phone toward me. 1 text message, 1 sentence. "She was chosen as a message. If you want war, we'll start with her." Dominic took me to places I didn't know existed in my own city. We left the penthouse after midnight. No explanation, no warning, just his hand on my shoulder and a quiet command to get dressed in something dark. I pulled on jeans and a black sweater while his men waited in the hallway, their faces blank as masks. In the elevator, Dominic handed me a phone. Not my phone, a burner, he called it. 1 number programmed in, his. "And if we get separated," he said, "you call that number, you don't move, you don't speak to anyone, you wait." Separated from what? He didn't answer. The car took us to the industrial district near the docks, a part of the city I'd only seen from highway overpasses, all rusted metal and broken streetlights and warehouses that looked abandoned until you noticed the cameras. We parked behind a building with no signs, no numbers, nothing to indicate what happened inside. Dominic got out first, scanned the shadows, then nodded for me to follow. Inside smelled like oil and river water and something metallic I didn't want to identify. Men stood in clusters, speaking languages I didn't recognize. Russian, maybe, Italian, something Eastern European that moved too fast for my brain to catch. They all stopped talking when Dominic walked in. They all looked at me like I was either an offering or a mistake. "Stay close," Dominic said. "Don't look at anyone directly. Don't speak unless I tell you to." What is this place? This is where the real city does business. I watched a transaction happen in the corner. 2 men exchanging a metal briefcase for a manila envelope thick with cash. No contracts, no receipts, just a handshake and a nod and the understanding that betrayal meant death. Another man counted bills at a folding table, his hands moving so fast they blurred. Shipping manifests covered the wall behind him, marked with codes I couldn't decipher. Then I saw the cop, Officer Martinez. I recognized him from the neighborhood. He bought coffee at the bodega across from Marino's. Always left exact change. Always smiled at the elderly women struggling with their grocery bags. He stood near a shipping container, talking quietly to a man in an expensive suit. The man handed him an envelope. Martinez didn't open it, just slipped it inside his jacket and walked away like he'd done this 1,000 times before. I felt sick. "Welcome to reality," Dominic said quietly. He'd been watching me watch Martinez. "The city you thought you knew, it doesn't exist. This is what's underneath. This is what keeps the streets clean and the politicians elected and the money moving. Every system you trust is built on men like him taking envelopes from men like me. You pay cops? I pay everyone." He started walking deeper into the warehouse. "And so does the man who sent you that package. The difference is, I keep my word. He just keeps bodies." We moved through a maze of containers and equipment I couldn't name. Dominic stopped at a door marked with a red X. 2 guards stepped aside. Inside was an office, makeshift but functional, with a desk and monitors showing surveillance feeds from across the city. I recognized my old apartment building, the street outside Marino's, the precinct where I'd tried to report the threat. "You're watching everything," I whispered. "I'm watching what matters." He pulled up a feed, the lobby of his building, footage from 3 days ago. On screen, I watched myself knock on his door, but the timestamp was wrong. It showed me arriving 30 minutes earlier than I actually had, standing in the hallway like I was waiting for something. "That's not real," I said. "I wasn't there that early. I came straight from the elevator." "I know." He switched feeds. This one showed Jerry the doorman talking to a man I didn't recognize, handing over a package. The man said something that made Jerry flinch. Jerry nodded. The man left. 2 minutes later, I appeared on screen, and Jerry practically ran toward me. "You were used. They edited the footage to make it look like you were surveillance, like you were part of the setup. Why? Because they want me paranoid. They want me to eliminate potential threats." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw something human underneath the cold control. "They want me to kill you." And for about 30 seconds, I considered it. The room suddenly felt smaller. Before I could respond, gunshots erupted outside. Dominic moved faster than I thought possible, pulling me down behind the desk as the door exploded inward. His gun was already in his hand. I didn't even see him draw it. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. He fired twice, and the screaming stopped. Then, he was pulling me up, pushing me toward a back exit I hadn't noticed, his body between me and whatever nightmare was unfolding behind us. We ran through corridors that smelled like gasoline and rust. More gunfire, shouting, the metallic taste of fear in my mouth. Dominic's hand never left my arm, guiding me through darkness while chaos erupted around us. We burst through a side door into cold night air, and suddenly there were cars and lights and his men forming a wall of bodies around us. The shooting stopped as quickly as it started. In the car, speeding away from the docks, Dominic opened his laptop. His hands were steady, like we hadn't just almost died. He pulled up a file and turned the screen toward me. Surveillance footage. But not from tonight. This was older, weeks old, and it showed me. Walking into my building, leaving for work, meeting friends for coffee, every moment of my life before I knocked on his door, cataloged and time-stamped and watched. "They've been following you for a month," Dominic said. "You were never random, Sophia. You were always the plan." Morning light cut through the penthouse windows like an accusation. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that surveillance footage, weeks of my life reduced to data points, my routines mapped and memorized by people who wanted to use me as a weapon. I kept thinking about all the times I'd felt watched on the subway, dismissed it as paranoia. All the moments I'd sensed someone behind me on the street, told myself I was being ridiculous. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't safe. Dominic found me at the window, watching the city wake up below. He'd showered, changed into fresh clothes, a different suit but the same armor of control. He carried 2 coffee mugs and set one beside me without asking if I wanted it. "We need to establish rules," he said. "I'm not a child." "No, you're a liability I'm choosing to keep alive." He sat across from me, perfectly composed. 3 rules. Non-negotiable. 1. You don't leave without telling me where you're going. 2. You don't trust anyone I haven't personally cleared. 3. You don't lie to me, not about where you've been, who you've talked to, or what you're thinking. I stared at him. That's not protection. That's ownership. It's survival. For who? You or me? Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe? That I'd pushed back. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying me like I was a puzzle he hadn't quite solved. You want rules? Give me one. One thing you need from me to make this bearable. I didn't expect that. The question caught me off guard. Genuine, in a way nothing else about him had been. I thought about it. Really thought about what I needed in this pristine cage with its beautiful views and invisible chains. Don't treat me like I'm stupid, I said finally. Don't hide things from me because you think I can't handle the truth. I knocked on your door. I saw those photographs. I survived last night. I'm not fragile. I'm not a thing you protect by keeping in the dark. He watched me for a long moment. Then the corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but something close. Something almost like respect. Deal, he said. The days that followed were strange. Dominic worked from the penthouse. Endless phone calls in languages I didn't speak. Video conferences with men in expensive suits who looked at the camera like they were calculating the cost of betrayal. I tried to stay invisible, reading in corners, but he kept pulling me into visibility, asking about my life before, my family, my dreams, things I'd given up when my mother got sick and the medical bills swallowed everything. You wanted to be a teacher, he said one afternoon. Not a question, a statement, like he'd read a file on me, memorized my history, a long time ago. Why did you stop? Because wanting things is expensive. Because surviving takes up all the space where dreaming used to fit. I looked at him. Why do you care? Because the people who want you dead see you as collateral, a message written in blood. I need to see you as a person. He paused. It's easier to protect someone when you understand what you're protecting. It was the most honest thing he'd said to me. That night, I fell asleep on his couch while he worked at the dining table. I didn't mean to. I just sat down to rest my eyes, and exhaustion pulled me under like a wave. When I woke up hours later, there was a blanket over me. Cashmere, probably worth more than my security deposit. And Dominic was still awake, still working. But he'd moved. Positioned himself between me and the door. Even in my sleep, he'd been standing guard. I hated how safe that made me feel. You don't have to do that, I said quietly. He looked up from his laptop. Do what? Watch me sleep like I might disappear. In my experience, that's exactly when people disappear. He closed the computer. You asked me not to treat you like you're stupid, so here's the truth. Every person I've ever cared about became a target. My mother, my sister, a woman I loved once, before I knew better. They all became leverage. They all paid for my choices with their lives. I'm not asking you to care about me. I know. He stood, walked to the window, his reflection dark against the city lights. But you're here, in my home, under my protection, and that means whether I want to or not, I'm responsible for keeping you alive. So yes, I watch you sleep, I monitor your breathing, I count the minutes between nightmares. Because if you die, it's because I failed. His phone rang before I could respond. He answered, listened for 10 seconds, and his entire body went rigid. When he hung up, his face was a mask of cold fury. What is it? He pulled up a photo on his phone and handed it to me. A man's face filled the screen. Late 40s, scarred jaw, eyes that looked like they'd watched the world burn and enjoyed it. Something about him made my skin crawl. His name is Marcus Levine, Dominic said quietly. He's the one who wants you dead. He's the one who sent that package. He's the one who's been watching you for weeks, building this trap. He paused. And he used to be my partner. Dominic made me tell him everything, every detail of my life for the past 6 months. Where I went, who I talked to, every stranger who asked too many questions or looked at me too long. We sat at his dining table with my calendar open on my phone, reconstructing my existence day by day while his men took notes like they were building a case file, which I realized they were. January 15th, Dominic said. You worked a double shift. What happened? Nothing. It was just busy. Valentine's rush starting early. Anyone unusual come in? It's a restaurant in Manhattan. Everyone's unusual. His jaw tightened. Sophia. I closed my eyes, trying to remember. Faces blurred together after 3 years of serving people who barely looked at me. Businessmen, tourists, couples. The lonely ones who came in alone and ordered too much food because eating in public was better than eating in empty apartments. Then something surfaced, a memory I'd buried under 100 other forgettable nights. There was a man, I said slowly. Late 40s, good tipper. He asked about the neighborhood. Dominic leaned forward. What did he look like? It was months ago, But then I saw Dominic's phone on the table, Marcus Levine's face staring up at me. My stomach dropped. That's him. He sat at table 7 for 2 hours, ordered whiskey, neat, asked me how long I'd lived in the area, if I liked the building, if I knew the owner. What did you tell him? That I'd been there a year, that the building was okay, that I didn't know who owned it. My hands started shaking. He said he was thinking of investing in the neighborhood, asked if I felt safe there, if security was good, if people came and went at all hours. And you told him? I said it was quiet, that the doorman was nice, that mostly it was professionals and families. I looked up at Dominic. I gave him my address. He said he wanted to send a bottle of wine as a thank you for the recommendations. I thought he was flirting. You thought he was a normal man having a normal conversation. I didn't know. The words came out too loud, too desperate. How was I supposed to know? He was charming and polite, and he tipped 40% and left a note on the receipt saying I'd been helpful. I didn't know I was being interviewed for whatever this is. Dominic stood, paced to the window. The silence stretched between us like a blade. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Marcus and I built an empire together. Started with nothing. 2 kids from Brooklyn who understood that the real money wasn't in stealing. It was in controlling the systems that allowed stealing to happen. We owned shipping routes, warehouses, politicians. For 10 years, we were unstoppable. What happened? He wanted to expand into trafficking. Girls, mostly. Young ones from overseas who wouldn't be missed. Dominic's reflection in the window looked like a ghost. I said no. He said I'd gone soft. We split the business down the middle. He took the overseas operations. I kept domestic. We agreed to stay out of each other's territory. But he didn't. He's been trying to take back control ever since. Slowly. Carefully. Buying my people. Undermining my deals. Waiting for the right moment to destroy everything I built. He turned to face me. You were that moment. A random waitress who lived near my building, who could be manipulated into delivering evidence at exactly the right time. He knew I'd see those photographs. He knew I'd either kill you as a security risk or protect you and become vulnerable. Either way, he wins. I felt sick. I wasn't random. I was chosen. You were a tool. And he's very good at using tools. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Julia. Hey, weird question. Did you tell anyone I go to Columbia? Some guy came by the dorm asking about you. Said he was a family friend but wouldn't give his name. Just wanted to know if I was okay after your emergency. Should I be worried? The room tilted. Dominic, I whispered. He read the message over my shoulder. His entire body went still, the kind of stillness that comes before violence. When did she send this? 7 minutes ago. He was already calling someone, barking orders in a voice I'd never heard before. Pure command, no negotiation. Get a team to Columbia, Morningside campus, Julia Reyes, sophomore. I want eyes on her in 5 minutes. Full extraction protocol. Extraction? I grabbed his arm. You're scaring her. He's using her to get to you, to break you, to make me vulnerable. He pulled away, still issuing orders. If anything happens to your sister, you'll blame me. You'll testify against me. You'll do anything he asks to keep her safe. That's the play. My phone buzzed again. Not a text this time. A video file from an unknown number. Dominic took the phone from my shaking hands and pressed play. The video showed Julia leaving her dorm, backpack over one shoulder, coffee in hand. She was smiling at something, unaware of the camera following her, unaware of the man in the black jacket walking 3 steps behind her, matching her pace perfectly. The video ended. A new text appeared. You took something from me. Now I'll take everything from you. Dominic's men extracted Julia in 40 minutes. I watched it happen through security feeds. 3 SUVs converging on Columbia's campus, men in plain clothes moving with military precision. Julia tried to run at first, confused and terrified, until one of them said my name, showed her my photo on his phone, told her I'd sent them. She got in the car because she trusted me, because in her world, big sisters didn't lie about things like safety. They brought her to a brownstone in Brooklyn. I didn't know Dominic owned. Safe house, he called it. Prison with better furniture, I thought. When I finally saw her through a video call, she looked small and scared and furious. What the hell is happening, Sophia? I can't explain right now, but you're safe there. Just stay inside. Do what they tell you. I'll fix this. Fix what? Who are these people? Why did that man follow me? Her voice cracked. Are you in trouble? No, I lied. I'm fine. This is just temporary. She didn't believe me? I wouldn't have believed me either. After I hung up, I heard things I wasn't supposed to hear. Dominic on the phone with someone named Vincent. Low voice, careful words, but I caught enough. Marcus's lieutenant, the warehouse on Pier 9. Make it clear what happens when you threaten what's mine. I tried not to think about what make it clear meant. 2 hours later, rumors started filtering back through Dominic's network. A man found unconscious near the docks. Another one missing 3 fingers. A third who turned himself into the police begging for protective custody, babbling about things he'd done, people he'd hurt, deals he'd made. Within 6 hours, Marcus Levine's entire East Coast operation was hemorrhaging. People flipping, evidence surfacing, connections severing like cut wires. This was what protection looked like in Dominic's world. Swift, brutal, effective. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt a dark gratitude I couldn't admit out loud. But the outside world was noticing. Detective Sarah Chen showed up at the penthouse on the 3rd day. She had the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much and stopped being surprised by human depravity. Dominic let her in because refusing would have looked worse. She sat in his pristine living room looking at me like I was a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Sophia Reyes, she said. Waitress. No criminal record. Student loans. 1 speeding ticket in 2019. Then suddenly you're living in a penthouse owned by Dominic Vale and your sister's under-armed guard. Want to tell me how that happened? I delivered a package to the wrong apartment. Must have been some package. She pulled out a tablet, showed me crime scene photos from the docks. 3 men hospitalized, 1 missing. All connected to an organization we've been investigating for 2 years. And it all happened the same night you were seen leaving a warehouse in the industrial district with Mr. Vale. Dominic appeared in the doorway. Detective Chen, always a pleasure. I'm not here for you. I'm here for her. Chen looked at me again. Whatever he's told you, whatever he's promised, you don't have to stay. We can protect you. Put you in witness protection. Get you and your sister somewhere safe where men like him can't reach you. I'm not being held here, I said. Aren't you? She slid a business card across the table. When you're ready to tell the truth, call me, day or night. We'll get you out. After she left, Dominic stood at the window for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. She's not wrong. I could arrange for you and Julia to disappear. New names, new lives. Somewhere Marcus will never find you. Why would you do that? Because keeping you here makes you a target. And every day you stay, the target gets bigger. He turned to face me. The detective was right about one thing. I can't protect you from the law. If they build a case and subpoena you, you'll have to testify. You'll have to tell them everything you've seen. Including what happened at the docks. Including that. Would it destroy you? If I testified? He considered the question like it was a chess move. It would damage me significantly. My lawyers could probably prevent most of it from sticking, but the publicity alone would cost me partnerships, money, influence, years of work. He paused. But you'd be free. The weight of that settled between us. He was giving me permission to betray him, offering me an exit. All I had to do was tell the truth to Detective Chen and watch Dominic's empire crumble. His phone rang. He answered, listened, and his expression went carefully blank. When he hung up, he showed me a news alert on his tablet. Organized crime investigation expands. Businessman Dominic Vale, named as person of interest in federal probe. Below the headline was a photo. Dominic leaving the warehouse the night of the shooting. His hand on my arm, my face clearly visible. We looked guilty. We looked like exactly what the prosecutors wanted us to look like. They're building a case. Dominic said quietly. And you're the only witness who can tell them what really happened that night. He looked at me. And for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something like vulnerability. The detective will be back. She'll offer you immunity, a new life, safety for Julia. All you have to do is testify against me." He walked to the door, then stopped. "Think about it, because when she comes back, I won't stop you from leaving." His phone buzzed. Mine buzzed at the same moment. Detective Chen's number appeared on both screens. Her message was simple. "I can protect you, can he?" I didn't testify, but I didn't stay silent either. For 3 days, I lived in that penthouse like a ghost haunting my own life, pacing the same paths until I'd memorized every imperfection in the marble floors, every reflection in the glass walls that made this beautiful cage feel smaller with each passing hour. Dominic worked 18-hour days, his lawyers arriving in waves with briefcases full of strategies and contingency plans. His business partners stopped returning calls. His investments started withdrawing. I watched his empire develop hairline fractures in real time, and I was the earthquake that started it all. Detective Chen's business card sat on my nightstand. I looked at it every morning when I woke up and every night before I tried to sleep. Her offer was simple, clean. Testify against Dominic Vale. Tell them everything I'd seen at the docks, except witness protection for me and Julia. Start over somewhere. Marcus Levine would never find us. A new city, new names, new lives built on the ashes of the old ones. It should have been an easy choice. Julia called twice a day from the Brooklyn safe house, her voice getting smaller with each conversation. "When can I go back to school? When can I see my friends? Sophia, what's happening?" I didn't have answers, just reassurances that tasted like lies even as I spoke them. She trusted me. She believed that big sisters knew how to fix things, how to make the world safe again. I was failing her with every day that passed. Dominic's lawyers prepped him for federal interrogation. I watched through the open office door as they ran through questions, building responses that were technically true but revealed nothing. He was good at it. Years of practice, probably. Years of dancing along the edge of what was legal and what was merely undiscovered. But even his carefully constructed defenses had cracks now, and those cracks had my name written all over them. "You should take Chen's offer," he said one night. We were sitting in the dark living room. City lights our only illumination. He'd poured himself whiskey but hadn't touched it. "This isn't your fight. You stumbled into it. You don't owe me loyalty." "Don't I?" "You owe yourself survival. You owe your sister a future. That matters more than whatever misplaced sense of obligation you feel toward me. Is that what you think this is? Obligation?" He didn't answer, just stared at his reflection in the window like it belonged to someone else. But something wasn't adding up. I'd spent 3 years waiting tables, watching people, learning to read the spaces between what they said and what they meant. Marcus Levine was smart, methodical, patient enough to watch me for weeks before making his move. So why would he expose himself now? Why let Dominic know it was him orchestrating everything? Unless the exposure was intentional. Unless he wanted Dominic distracted, focused on me, while something else was happening in the blind spots. I started looking, late at night, while Dominic slept, or pretended to sleep in his office. I went through everything I could access without triggering his security systems. Old receipts from Marinos that I'd photographed for tax purposes, mundane records of tips and shift changes that suddenly felt like archaeological evidence. My social media history, looking for patterns I'd missed the first time. Security footage Dominic didn't know I'd copied to a flash drive before his men swept my apartment, backing up my life before it disappeared. I was searching for proof that I was right, that this was bigger than a package delivery gone wrong, that Marcus's plan had layers I hadn't seen yet. The timestamp found me at 3 a.m. The surveillance video Marcus had sent, the one showing me at Dominic's building weeks before I actually knocked on his door, had metadata embedded in the file properties. Most people wouldn't think to check. But I dated a film student once who'd taught me about digital footprints, how every piece of media leaves traces of its creation. The video showed it had been edited on February 8th, rendered, exported, finished. But the receipt from Marcus's visit to Marinos was dated February 12th, 4 days later. He'd created the fake surveillance footage before he ever met me, before he knew my name, before he sat at table 7 and asked about my building with that charming smile that made me think he was just another lonely businessman far from home, which meant I wasn't the original plan. I was the backup. Someone else was supposed to deliver that package. Someone else was supposed to be standing in Dominic's hallway when everything went wrong. I pulled up every photo I had from the restaurant that month, searching faces and backgrounds, looking for connections I'd dismissed as coincidence. Found one from Valentine's week, Marcus sitting at his usual table, but his attention wasn't on me. He was watching another waitress, Claudia, 23, art student. Worked weekends to pay for supplies. She'd quit 3 weeks ago without notice, without saying goodbye, disappeared so completely that even her roommate Maria didn't know where she went. Just vanished like she'd never existed. I found Claudia's Instagram at 4 in the morning. Her last post was from February 10th, a photograph of black roses in a cheap glass vase. The caption made my blood run cold. Sometimes leaving is the only way to survive. Thank you to everyone who tried to help. I'm sorry I couldn't stay. The comments below were frantic. Friends asking where she was, Maria begging her to call, her mother saying she'd filed a missing person report. But Claudia never responded. The account went silent. Another ghost in a city full of them. Marcus had tried this before. With Claudia. With someone else who worked at Marino's, who lived in the neighborhood, who could be manipulated into delivering something to the wrong door. It hadn't worked. Maybe she'd gotten scared. Maybe she'd seen through his charm. Maybe someone had warned her in time. So he'd found me instead. Same restaurant, same building, same trap with a different face. I needed proof, real proof. Evidence that would show Detective Chen that Dominic wasn't the villain in this story. He was the target. Documentation that would prove Marcus had been planning this for months, cycling through potential victims until he found one naive enough to trust him. But that meant going places Dominic had explicitly forbidden. That meant breaking every rule we'd established, violating the fragile trust we'd built in this impossible situation. That meant doing the one thing I'd promised not to do. It meant leaving the penthouse alone. I planned it like a heist. Studied the building's security for 3 days, noting camera angles and guard rotations and blind spots in coverage. The main exits were impossible. Too many eyes, too much surveillance, too many of Dominic's men positioned to intercept anyone who tried to leave without authorization. But the service exit that led to the laundry room was monitored differently. 1 camera, 1 guard. A rotation that created a 4-minute window every 2 hours when both were focused elsewhere. I waited for that window at 6 in the evening, wore dark clothes, carried nothing that would identify me. Took the fire stairs down 8 floors, my heart hammering so hard I thought the sound alone would trigger alarms. Slipped through the laundry room while the attendant was in the back, exited onto a side street where Dominic's men weren't positioned. I was free, and terrified, and exhilarated in a way that made me understand why people became addicted to danger. The subway to Brooklyn felt like traveling to another planet. I found an internet cafe in Williamsburg that somehow still existed. A relic from before smartphones made such places obsolete. Paid cash for 30 minutes. Created a burner email. Contacted someone from Marcus's organization, a low-level dealer named Tommy, whose name I'd seen in Dominic's files, someone who'd been arrested twice and released both times, someone desperate enough to take risks. I pretended to have information to sell, details about Dominic's next shipment, inside knowledge about his security protocols, asked for a meeting, made myself sound mercenary enough to be believable. Tommy responded in 4 minutes. Midnight, Red Hook, parking garage on Van Brunt. Come alone. I knew it was stupid. I knew Dominic would be furious. I knew I was walking into danger with nothing but intuition and desperation for protection. But I couldn't be the passive witness anymore. Couldn't be the thing that happened to him while he made all the decisions about my survival. I needed to fight. I needed to matter in this story, beyond being leverage or collateral, or the innocent bystander who stumbled into the wrong hallway at the wrong time. I sent Dominic one text from the burner phone. I'm sorry. I'll explain everything. I promise I'm trying to help. Then I powered down both phones, went dark, became untraceable. The hours until midnight stretched like years. I walked through Brooklyn neighborhoods I'd never seen, past brownstones that cost more than I'd earn in 10 lifetimes, through parks where families laughed and children played and life continued in blissful ignorance of the violence happening in the spaces between their safe, normal existence. I bought coffee I didn't drink, sat on benches watching the sun set over the Manhattan skyline, wondered if this was the last sunset I'd ever see. At 11:30, I took the subway to Red Hook. The parking garage was exactly as horrible as I'd imagined, concrete and shadows and the smell of oil and urine and fear. 4 levels. Mostly empty. The kind of place where terrible things happened and no one heard the screaming. I got there early. Positioned myself on the second level where I could see the entrance. My hands were shaking. My breath came too fast. Every sound was a threat. Tires on concrete, footsteps echoing, the distant wail of sirens that might have been police or ambulances, or just the soundtrack of a city that never stopped hurting. At 11:58, a car pulled in, black sedan, tinted windows, New York plates. It drove slowly through the first level, then climbed the ramp to the second, parked 3 spaces away from where I stood frozen like prey that's finally understood it's been caught. The engine cut off, 30 seconds of silence that felt like drowning. Then the driver's door opened. Marcus Levine stepped out, not Tommy, not some low-level dealer I could manipulate or outrun. Marcus himself, wearing an expensive coat and a smile that said he'd known all along this was a trap I'd set for myself, that I'd walked into his hands exactly as he'd planned. "Sophia Reyes," he said, his voice echoing in the concrete space. He walked toward me with casual confidence, hands in his pockets like we were meeting for coffee instead of a midnight confrontation in an abandoned parking garage. "Dominic's been training you, teaching you to think strategically, to take initiative, to act instead of react. I'm impressed. Really. You've come a long way from the scared waitress who knocked on the wrong door." I tried to speak. My voice failed, but he forgot the most important lesson. Marcus stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see the scar on his jaw, the coldness in his eyes, the complete absence of anything resembling mercy. Never enter a negotiation without knowing who has the power, and right now, Sophia, I have all of it. His men appeared from behind pillars and parked cars. 5 of them, maybe 6. I'd been so focused on Marcus that I hadn't noticed them moving into position, surrounding me, cutting off every exit. They were armed, professional. They moved like people who'd done this before and knew exactly how it would end. "I don't want to kill you," Marcus said conversationally. "That would be too quick, too merciful, too easy for Dominic to process and move past. No, I want him to watch you die slowly. I want him to know that everything he touches turns to ash, that everyone he tries to protect ends up paying for his choices with their blood. And you, sweet girl, you just made it incredibly easy." They grabbed me before I could run. Hands on my arms, my shoulders, lifting me off the ground like I weighed nothing. I tried to scream, but someone's palm covered my mouth, cutting off sound, cutting off air, cutting off any chance of rescue. They were dragging me toward a van with no windows and no plates and no hope. My phone was in my pocket, powered off, useless. Except it buzzed, one single vibration against my hip, which meant it was on, which meant someone had remotely activated it, which meant Dominic knew exactly where I was, had probably known from the moment I left the penthouse, had been tracking me through systems I didn't understand while I thought I was being clever and independent and brave. Marcus felt me tense, saw the realization in my eyes. He leaned close, his breath hot against my ear, smelling like expensive whiskey and violence. "He's coming for you," Marcus whispered. "Good. I was hoping he would. This only works if he watches." I woke up in a warehouse I recognized, and that recognition was worse than waking up somewhere unknown. The same building from the docks. The same space where Dominic had first pulled back the curtain on his world and shown me what power really looked like when it stopped pretending to be civilized. Marcus had brought me full circle, completing the narrative he'd been writing since the moment he sat at table 7 in Marino's and decided I would be useful. The symmetry was intentional. Everything Marcus did was intentional. I was tied to a chair in the center of the empty floor. Professional knots, tight enough to restrict movement but not tight enough to cut off circulation completely. He wanted me conscious, alert, able to understand everything that was about to happen. The chair sat in a pool of light from a work lamp positioned like a stage spotlight, and I understood with sick clarity that this was theater. I was a prop in a performance designed for an audience of 1. Marcus stood 20 feet away by a grimy window, phone in hand, recording. His face was illuminated by the screen's glow, and he looked almost peaceful. Content, like a director finally shooting the scene he'd been imagining for years. "Dominic," he said to the camera, his voice carrying across the empty space. "By the time you see this, it'll already be over. You thought you could walk away from our partnership? You thought you could refuse me, refuse my vision, my ambition, my willingness to do what was necessary, and build your own empire while I scraped by on overseas scraps? Everything you have should have been ours. Everything you are, I made possible. I gave you your first territory, your first connections, your first taste of real power. And you repaid me by playing moral arbiter, by drawing lines in the sand and pretending some money is cleaner than other money. He turned the camera toward me. I refused to look scared, refused to give him what he wanted. I kept my face blank, my breathing steady, my eyes focused on a point just past the lens where he couldn't see the calculation happening behind them. This girl, Marcus continued, she's nothing. A waitress, a mistake, someone who knocked on the wrong door at the wrong time. But you made her matter. You protected her. You moved her into your home. You put guards on her sister. You showed the entire city that Sophia Reyes means something to Dominic Vale. And that, old friend, was your fatal error. Because now she's not nothing. Now she's leverage. Now she's the knife I get to twist until you finally understand that mercy is just another word for weakness. He turned the camera off, handed it to one of his men. Send it. But I was already working the ropes. Not dramatically. No sudden thrashing. No obvious struggling that would draw attention. Just small, methodical pressure on the knots, while Marcus delivered his monologue like every villain who'd ever underestimated the woman tied to the chair. I'd spent 3 sleepless nights in Dominic's penthouse watching YouTube videos on escape techniques after the first threat arrived, survivalist channels, military training demonstrations, tutorial after tutorial on how to exploit the small spaces in rope tension, how to use body moisture to create slip, how to methodically work a knot while appearing completely still. I'd practiced with shoelaces when Dominic wasn't looking, with the belt from a bathrobe, with anything I could find that would let me rehearse the motion until my fingers knew the pattern even when my brain was flooded with adrenaline and terror, preparing for a possibility I'd hoped would never come but somehow always knew would. The rope loosened, just slightly, just enough to give me hope that wasn't entirely stupid. You know what's funny? Marcus walked toward me, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. He'd dismissed most of his men, sent them outside to watch for Dominic's arrival, confident enough in those knots to believe I was secure. Only 2 remained inside, only 2 between me and impossible odds. Dominic thinks he's protecting you, but really, he's just making you valuable. The more he cares, the more leverage you become. The more you mean to him, the more useful you are to me. If he'd killed you that first day like he should have, like I would have, none of this would matter. But he went soft, started seeing you as a person instead of a problem. That's always been his weakness. He feels too much. And you don't feel anything, I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Stronger. Like some part of me had finally stopped being afraid and started being angry. Oh, I feel plenty. Marcus crouched in front of me, close enough that I could see the scar tissue on his jaw where someone had cut him years ago, close enough to smell the expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask the scent of violence underneath. I feel rage at being dismissed, ambition that your boyfriend tried to contain, the deep, satisfying pleasure of watching an enemy break piece by piece. I feel everything that matters. I just don't feel guilt. That's the difference between men like me and men like Dominic. He thinks there are rules. I know there are only consequences. The warehouse door didn't open. It exploded. Not kicked in, not crashed through. Exploded. The heavy metal door blew inward off its hinges in a shower of sparks and twisted metal and smoke that rolled through the space like fog. Dominic didn't announce himself, didn't negotiate, didn't give Marcus the satisfaction of a standoff or final words or any of the theatrical bullshit that Marcus had been counting on. His men flooded the warehouse like a coordinated military strike. 15 of them at minimum, maybe 20, appearing from multiple entry points simultaneously. They moved with precision that spoke of training and practice and money spent on people who knew how to end threats efficiently. The 2 guards Marcus had left inside reached for their weapons but never got them clear of their holsters. They were on the ground before they could fire a shot, zip-tied and disarmed and neutralized in under 5 seconds. The gunfire outside lasted maybe 20 seconds. Then it was just shouting and the heavy sound of bodies hitting concrete and Marcus scrambling backward, his confidence evaporating as he realized he'd miscalculated everything. He reached for a weapon he'd been too arrogant to keep on his person, too certain of his control to imagine he might need it. I worked the last knot free. My hands were loose. The rope fell away. Marcus saw the movement and lunged toward me, toward the gun on the table behind my chair, a backup weapon his men had placed there and forgotten about in the chaos. We both reached for it at the same moment. My fingers closed around cold metal. His hand closed around my wrist with bruising force. For one terrible moment we were frozen, his face inches from mine, his eyes wild with fury and fear and the dawning realization that he'd lost everything. The gun was between us like a prayer neither of us knew how to finish, our hands fighting for control while the world exploded around us in violence and shouting, and the end of his carefully constructed revenge. "You're nothing," Marcus hissed. Spit flecked his lips. "A waitress. A mistake. You don't get to win." "Maybe not," I said. "But you definitely lose." Then Dominic was there, pulling Marcus away with brutal efficiency. His hand locked around Marcus's throat and slammed him backward into a concrete pillar hard enough that I heard the impact echo through the warehouse. Marcus's grip on my wrist broke. The gun clattered to the floor. Dominic's men swarmed in, zip ties appearing like magic, securing Marcus's wrists and ankles while he thrashed and screamed threats that meant nothing anymore, because the power had shifted completely and irrevocably. Dominic pulled me to my feet. His hands were shaking. Dominic Vale, who controlled half the city's underground economy, who negotiated with crime lords and politicians with equal composure, whose control was so absolute that I'd begun to think it was biological, was shaking as he checked me for injuries. His fingers ghosted over my wrists where the ropes had left marks, my arms where Marcus's men had grabbed me, my face like he was memorizing proof that I was still alive. "Are you hurt?" His voice cracked. "Did he? Tell me what he did. Tell me everything." "I'm fine." I wasn't fine. I was the opposite of fine. I was shaking and terrified and riding an adrenaline wave that made everything feel both too sharp and somehow distant, like I was watching this happen to someone else. But I was alive. That counted for something. I found proof. Claudia, the other waitress from Marino's, he tried this before with her. There's a pattern. Timestamps that don't match. Evidence that you weren't the aggressor in any of this. You were defending yourself against a hostile takeover he'd been planning for months. Dominic stared at me like I'd started speaking another language. "You left the penthouse for evidence?" "I left the penthouse because I was tired of being saved." My voice cracked on the last word. I wanted to fight. I wanted to matter in this story beyond being something you had to protect. I wanted to be a person who acts instead of a thing that gets acted upon. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Really seeing me, not as a liability or an asset or a witness who needed managing, but as someone separate from his control who'd made choices he didn't orchestrate. "You could have died. You understand that? Marcus was going to torture you. He was going to record it and send it to me piece by piece until I broke. You could have died horribly, and it would have been because you thought you needed to prove something." I didn't think. I knew. I pulled away from his grip. I knew I couldn't spend the rest of my life waiting for you to tell me when it was safe to breathe. I knew that if I testified against you or ran away with Detective Chen or did anything except fight, I'd spend forever wondering if I could have been brave. And I can't live like that. "I won't." Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Real police this time. Detective Chen had been coordinating with Dominic from the moment my phone came back online. She'd heard everything Marcus said through the open line. The confession, the threats, the admission of conspiracy and attempted murder and enough federal charges to bury him for 3 lifetimes. By the time they pulled Marcus out of the warehouse in handcuffs, she had recordings, timestamps, testimony from Dominic's men who'd witnessed everything. And most importantly, she had Marcus's own words condemning him. Outside, dawn was breaking over the East River in shades of pink and gold that seemed impossible after the darkness inside. The city looked clean in that early light, almost innocent, like it didn't contain warehouses where people got tied to chairs and threatened with torture. Like it was just buildings and bridges and people going about their ordinary lives, unaware of the violence happening in the margins. Dominic stood beside me at the water's edge, watching the light change like he was trying to remember what peace felt like. His hands were in his pockets. His suit was ruined, torn and dirty and spotted with things I didn't want to identify. He looked exhausted, human, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen him before. What happens now? I asked. Now. He turned to face me, and there was something different in his eyes. Something softer than the cold control I'd gotten used to. Now you get to choose, really choose, without pressure or threats or fear. I can set you up anywhere. New identity, money, safety for you and Julia. You can walk away from this and never look back. You can take Detective Chen's offer and testify and start over completely, or you stay, but not as someone I protect, not as a witness I need to keep alive. Stay as, he paused, searching for words, as someone who matters, as someone who fights beside me instead of hiding behind me. I looked at him, really looked at him past the expensive suit and the dangerous reputation and the control that masked everything he actually felt. I saw someone who'd been alone for so long that he'd forgotten what partnership looked like. Someone who'd lost people he loved and decided the solution was to never love anyone again. Someone who'd opened his door 8 days ago expecting a threat and found me instead, holding a package that should have destroyed us both. I'm not leaving, I said. The words came out clear and certain. But from now on, I'm not your witness or your liability or your protected asset. I'm your partner. Equal stakes, equal risk, equal voice in decisions. You don't get to lock me in penthouses for my own good. You don't get to make plans without telling me. You don't get to decide what I can handle. He considered this for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, deliberately, he extended his hand. Deal. I took it. His grip was firm, honest. The handshake of someone who finally understood that protection without agency is just another kind of prison. That the strongest partnerships are built not on one person saving another, but on two people choosing to face the danger together. Your sister gets to go home today, Dominic said. Back to school, back to normal. I'll keep security on her for a few months until we're certain Marcus's organization is completely dismantled, but she won't know they're there. She gets her life back. And us? We figure it out. One day at a time. One crisis at a time. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but something close. Something that looked almost like hope. Fair warning. My life is complicated. Dangerous. There will be more threats, more late-night calls, more moments where everything we've built feels like it might collapse. I knocked on your door. I reminded him. I knew what I was walking into. You had no idea what you were walking into. Maybe not then, but I do now. And I'm still here. We stood there as the sun rose over the city, two people who'd walked into each other's lives by accident and chosen to stay by design. The water lapped against the dock. Seagulls cried overhead. Somewhere in the distance, the city was waking up. Coffee shops opening, subway cars filling, a million ordinary people starting their ordinary days in a city that contained both those ordinary moments and the extraordinary violence we'd just survived. I'd knocked on the wrong apartment door 8 days ago, met a man who should have killed me, but chose to protect me instead. Been threatened and hunted and used as leverage in a war I didn't understand. I'd been terrified and helpless and so angry at my own powerlessness that I'd risked everything to prove I could fight back. And I'd won. Not because Dominic saved me, though he had, but because I'd saved myself first. Because I'd stopped being the girl who knocked on the wrong door and become someone who kicked down doors when necessary. Someone who fought. Someone who mattered. Dominic's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and laughed, an actual laugh, surprised and genuine. Detective Chen wants to know if you'll testify against Marcus. Will it help? It would guarantee he never sees daylight again. Then yes. I took his phone and typed out a message to Chen. I'll testify. But only about Marcus. Not about Dominic. He saved my life. That's all the testimony you're getting. I sent it before I could second-guess myself. Dominic read the message over my shoulder and shook his head. You just committed perjury for me. I committed truth. You did save my life. That's not a lie. The district attorney won't see it that way. Then the district attorney can come talk to me about it. I'm not scared of lawyers anymore. I'm barely scared of mafia bosses. I looked up at him. I'm only scared of going back to who I was before. The person who didn't fight, who didn't matter, who let life happen to her instead of making choices. He pulled me against him. A quick, fierce embrace that spoke of relief and fear and something neither of us was ready to name yet. I felt his heartbeat against my cheek, fast and unsteady, proof that he'd been more terrified than he'd let on. Proof that somewhere underneath the control, he actually cared whether I lived or died. "Don't ever do that again," he said into my hair. "Do what? Save myself. Leave without telling me. Risk yourself like that. Make me think I'd lost." He stopped. Pulled back. "Just don't. I can't promise that. I know." He smiled then. Sad and honest and accepting. That's what terrifies me. We walked away from the warehouse together as the city woke around us. Partners, equals, two people who'd found each other in the chaos and decided that whatever came next, they'd face it together. I'd knocked on the wrong apartment door, but somehow, impossibly, it had led me exactly where I needed to be. If you made it to the end of this story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from, and click the yellow bell to subscribe to the channel and support us. Keep the adventure going by clicking on the suggested video on your screen.